I created one of the very first videos about using a mouse and keyboard with your Xbox Series S. And since then, there has been a huge influx in uploads of people attempting to replace their gaming PCs with budget Xboxes. Since making that video, I've had a ton of requests from people asking to show more gameplay and share the pros and cons of certain games. In the last video, I used a wired mouse and also a wired keyboard, and I said that I couldn't get my wireless mouse and keyboard working correctly even though I was using the Bluetooth adapters. Well, it turns out after updating the firmware on my Logitech mouse and keyboard, they are now working as intended, just like they were with the wired mouse and keyboard, which makes it much better for our gaming setup because it's significantly cleaner and it's a little bit easier to set up without all of the cables. The first game we're going to take a look at is Halo Infinite with the mouse and keyboard. This is definitely one of the best games on console at the moment for mouse and keyboard support. So currently at the moment, my Xbox Series S is connected to a 1080p monitor and we are locked at 60 FPS because it's running through a capture card. So we can't play at 1080p 120, but we can still crank up the field of view just as I have it on my Xbox Series X. So although we're just playing at a low resolution, we're not restricted on any other settings because we're on the cheaper Xbox. And for reference purposes, I have played Halo Infinite on the One X, the Series X, the Series S, and also in 8K on a 3090 Ti. Considering all of the different gaming platforms I have played this title on, the Series S is by far the cheapest console out of all of them, and to be honest, I think it performs very well considering how budget-friendly orientated the Series S is. I think it's incredibly underrated. People get too distracted by, oh, it's only 1080p, 120 FPS. It's still pretty difficult to achieve even with some sort of budget gaming PCs at certain times. The only thing that I would say is a huge problem with a lot of these console games using the mouse and keyboard is the lack of a mouse cursor inside of the menus. You have to navigate the menus with the keyboard, which at times can be just a little bit slow and clunky feeling. Like right now, I just want to increase the sensitivity of my mouse, and it just feels like it takes ages compared to just using a quick mouse cursor in and out of the menu. So that's feeling a little bit better. Now, one thing I love about the Xbox Series S is how it's now giving gamers options. Because of its quite accessible price point, it has a very low point of entry, and it gives you a very comparable gaming experience to that of the higher tier. You know, like the Series S is £249, a Series X is £449, so quite a huge jump. And then if you want a gaming PC, it's like £500, £600 if you want a comparable gaming experience to what you get from the Series S. And where I find the Series S being quite useful is for people who maybe have an outdated gaming PC and they don't really want to update it in the current market at the moment with like GPU prices being high, all the PC components due to the chip shortages being a bit higher. If you have a slightly older gaming PC from maybe 2016, 2017, and you're now struggling to play some of those titles at 1440p or even, you know, high refresh rate at 1080p, the Series S bridges that gap absolutely perfectly, and Halo Infinite is a prime example of sort of peak mouse and keyboard potential from a gaming console that I hope only gets better in the future with other titles. A very cool thing about Fortnite is that it is one of the very few games on console to have a mouse cursor inside of the menu system. This resolves a lot of the problems that I previously mentioned inside of Halo Infinite. It makes it significantly faster for navigating your menu system and jumping into games and tweaking settings. Now on the Xbox Series S, Fortnite loads in incredibly quickly. I did a speed test recently and Fortnite takes literally like 10 seconds to load in versus over a minute and 10 seconds on the original Xbox One. And to be honest, I think the loading times of the Xbox Series S are incredibly underrated. I got lots of comments from people saying like, oh, what's the point in me saving 50 seconds? That's going to really change my life. But it's the fact that the 50 seconds stacks up across the entire year. If you're playing the game every single night, it's loads of time across the year and across your life that you've just wasted sat on a Fortnite loading screen. It's significantly important. You can't get that time back. So Fortnite is another one of those games that does run at 120 FPS on the Xbox Series S, so fantastic performance. And the graphics, looking from what I'm playing here, I'd say they probably look like high graphics setting preset if you were playing this game on PC. Now, I must admit, I don't play Fortnite that frequently. Everyone's like, you're such a loser for playing Fortnite. I literally only play Fortnite in YouTube videos because it's so popular and people always request it, and it's a great benchmark for how things are performing for that reason. Now, one problem I have noticed when playing mouse and keyboard on the Xbox is this pop-up that often occurs. Now, when your controller goes to sleep, your Xbox will say, in order to continue playing, you need to have a controller connected to your console. And right now, we've got a mouse and keyboard connected. If I click confirm and try and go back to playing, you can see it works, but then it instantly pops back up. And this happens in the majority of titles, so you then have to turn your Xbox controller back on and then confirm. So if you plugged in a plain charge kit, it would be on all the time. This wouldn't be a problem. But then the next issue is you put your controller down on the desk, and in a majority of games like Halo, for example, and Fortnite, the vibrations will continue through the controller. So when you're shooting your weapons or doing whatever, stuff's blowing up, the controller will vibrate on your desk. So that's a little bit of a downside with the mouse and keyboard on your console. Now, to give credit to Fortnite, I do think this game gets bashed quite a lot because of its popularity, and also especially because it has quite a young player base. So a lot of older gamers, I think, sort of slate this game off. Now, I don't think it's such a terrible game. I actually have quite a lot of fun when I have played it, but my main gripe with Fortnite is I find it way too easy. Coming from Call of Duty Warzone, Fortnite just doesn't give me that kick of adrenaline when you're like in the final zone and stuff's going to happen. For example, the first ever time I played Fortnite was on a MacBook Pro back in November when I was testing out the M1 Max chips and their gaming performance. This was my first ever time playing Fortnite after loads of hours inside of Warzone, and I came first. I didn't know anything about the map, any of the game mechanics. I don't think I built a single wall or did anything like that. I had a terrible pistol, and I won. I just found the game way too easy, and I've played since and leveled up or whatever, and it just doesn't really float my boat in that perspective. But on the whole, using the mouse and keyboard with this game on the Xbox Series S, not too much to complain about, and I think you'd have a lot of fun if this was your full-time setup. Next, let's jump into a game of Call of Duty Warzone. Now, before you can search for a match, you do have to choose mouse and keyboard inside of the input device, otherwise it's going to just matchmake you with other people playing with a controller. So we've got to select mouse and keyboard, which will mean we will most likely be playing against people on gaming PCs. If you have played Call of Duty Warzone on a gaming PC, it will feel very familiar. You can see you've got all of your tabs, your weapons, your operators, battle pass, etc. So you can access everything exactly the same with the mouse cursor. You've got your graphic settings down here as well. However, where the biggest difference lies is within the gameplay. Now, there may actually be some downsides to using the mouse and keyboard with your Xbox Series S for this game in particular, and that's because of skill-based matchmaking. Because you'll be playing against people with gaming PCs, most likely you're going to be put in harder lobbies because they've got mouse and keyboard. They're significantly more hardcore in the way that they take this game seriously compared to some guy just sitting on his sofa with a controller. Now, for me, probably the worst thing about Call of Duty on the console version is the fact it hasn't really had a proper next generation update. It only had an FPS boost, so the graphics still look pretty mediocre for next generation consoles. This is even true on the Series X version when I've played it on there, compared to what you get if you play it on a half decent PC. Another huge weakness of Call of Duty on the console is the fact you can't adjust the field of view. You're fixed at the field of view, whereas if you play things like Cold War or Vanguard, you can adjust the field of view on the next generations of those titles, whereas on the next generation version of Warzone, you can't adjust your field of view. So if you're coming from being a PC player, you'll feel maybe a little bit sick with the FOV that you have because you can't widen it out as you can in other Call of Duty titles on the console. But for the most part, it still feels alright. Mouse and keyboard feels smooth. It doesn't feel too juddery when you're running around on the map. It feels responsive to your shooting or whatever. It's just the field of view. For me, that's a big killer when it comes to actually playing this game. After a few months of using the mouse and keyboard with my Xbox Series S, I can confidently say that this experience is actually far better than I anticipated. There are a lot of great games that support mouse and keyboard, as we've demonstrated within this video, and I haven't even scratched the surface and featured very popular games like Minecraft that also support mouse and keyboard. However, even though more and more games are supporting this way of playing on console, unfortunately, very popular games still don't. For example, here we have Apex Legends, a very popular first-person shooter, and I cannot use my mouse and keyboard within the menu system. It is only allowing me to use a controller. And if we take a look at other games within my library, franchises such as Battlefield also don't support mouse and keyboard, which is a huge shame as this franchise is very popular on PC. If you own an Xbox Series S and you want to know about some hidden features, make sure you check out this video next to avoid destroying your console.